Hey guys, your friendly neighborhood natty here. My name is Matthew, and today's video is going to be a book review on Isoplex by Mark de Bremaker. Now the author actually wrote another book which is very similar to Isoplex called Plioflex, and I actually bought both of them. So I bought both the Isoplex and the Plioflex book. But this review I'm just going to talk about Isoplex, and the reason why I wanted to start with this one is because this is kind of more general baseline for athletic health and strength, whereas Plioflex is a little bit more focused on martial arts. So with this book, I have to say that it really is for advanced athletes. It's really not for your beginner, or if you had, kind of left exercise for the last 5 to 10 years. You don't want to jump into something like this. You really want to have a strong baseline first. The reason why is mostly because of the isometric, mostly that being kind of an increased heart rate, kind of an exercise, and then the plyometric, which is also just as important. That one, of course, is dealing with a large amount of force transmitted to your joints, tendons, ligaments. These are things that do not come back after serious injury. So that's why you want to take the plyometrics very slow, make sure you build them up appropriately. That way there are no, lifelong injuries you have to put up with. Now, you might think, okay, well, what can I possibly work on, before you can even start on this stuff? Well, the good news is that the author, Mark de Bremaker, actually already has 2 chapters here, Chapter 2 and Chapter 7. Chapter 2 kind of deals with bodybuilding. Now, that may not be your goal, but, the fact remains that most people that get out of shape come back into shape and then go pursue whatever athletic discipline they want. Usually, bodybuilding was the one that allowed them to come back, right? I was in martial arts for a long time. I had left for a long time. I got fat. And then, to get back to martial arts, I had to go to bodybuilding first, which created the baseline, and then I was allowed to kind of go back into martial arts. So with this book, Mark de Bremaker already has a chapter on bodybuilding, and it's quite impressive, the detail that he goes into it. When I did bodybuilding to get my body back, it took a very long time. A lot of online research I had to do for myself, trying to figure out stuff that works, didn't work. And I gotta say, what I've learned is mostly already here in chapter 2, which is kind of nice. So even if you're kind of interested in isometrics, plyometrics, and plexiometrics, you don't have to do your own research or come back later. You could already buy this book and then just focus on the chapter 2 bodybuilding. He really goes through everything you could possibly want to know. For being written in 2017, it is incredibly impressive, the amount of detail and knowledge that the author goes through. And then as supplementary as well, I recommend Chapter 7, which again is talking on that nutrition and sleep, which is the other half of fitness. Having a very good baseline fitness is nutrition and sleep. I'd say nutrition is probably 70% of the work, and then exercise is really just 30%. So don't be shy if, I've been out of working out for, years and decades. The bodybuilding chapter here can easily help you get started. And of course, I recommend additional supplementary information on the internet, books, articles, things you can read to kind of craft your own program. Now, when you make that program as well, kind of stick with it until what I would consider, or you yourself can determine that you've reached, I'd say, 75% peak physical health. So, your strength should be at about 75% maximum health. And then, of course, your diet should also be at 75%. And then at that point, you can kind of decide. Some of you might just stay with bodybuilding the whole way and not come back. But if you do want to come back to Isoplex, I'd say being 75% peak physical health and diet is the time you can begin to consider adding some of this stuff into your exercise routine. Now, talking about the term Isoplex itself, this is kind of a conjunction word that was created by the author to explain his exercise program, which takes from 3 major components, which is isometric, plyometric, and flexiometric. So isometrics, I'm sure you may or may not have heard, it's basically kind of like a contraction of the muscle, but there's no movement in the muscle, So when you're like a bicep curl, right, there's a movement, there's a concentric action, there's an eccentric action. But if you're just flexing the whole time, right? And there's no movement. That would be an example of isometric, which of course can have yielding isometric. So you're holding a heavy weight and you're just kind of letting time go by as your arm weakens and you're trying to resist overcoming the weight. And then there's overcoming isometrics, which is of course you're trying to, I would say, do the impossible, maybe push a wall or something like that. You can't physically do that. But again, I think those are kind of the two major components. Now, Mr. de Bramaker also does mention a third isometric, which he attributes to katas in the martial arts, which is like dynamic self-resistance. So this is kind of like when you're putting pressure, tension in a movement which is like physically impossible, like your body can't physically do that, or it's limiting itself. I think the best example I found and I added in my exercise routine is kind of like when you have the outside of your palms facing each other, right? And your arms will be down like this, and then you will kind of twist in further and then flex the chest at the same time. That is physically impossible for you to do, but of course there's tension there, and that is the example of dynamic self-resistance that Mr. de Bramaker talks about. Plyometrics, I'm sure you've heard this. It's pretty, I'd say pretty common. Maybe not as much in the past, but I'd say today it's pretty common. The typical one, of course, is the box jumps. But the idea is that you are kind of teaching your joints, tendons, and ligaments to get used to a force, right? So, a certain height has a certain force. The higher height, of course, is more force, right? You're coming down, come back up. And again, working very slowly so you don't injure yourself, because again, those points of body, joints, tendons, and ligaments, they don't come back. They don't come back when they get injured. So very, very good idea to take that very slowly. Quick note on isometrics as well. When you're training isometrics, I mentioned it does increase your heart rate very quickly. So, you shouldn't be trying to put maximum effort force for like half a minute. We're really talking about 8 to 10 seconds. And if you want to do reps, I would say probably wait half a minute, 30 seconds. So very isometric, very high tension. You don't want to hold that for very long. And then with the plyometrics, again, just being appropriate with it and making sure that you are taking it slow. From the martial arts angle too, I want to say with plyometrics, every punch and kick that we do is also technically a plyometric, because you're trying to punch as quickly with as much force as possible. You try to kick with as much force and speed as possible. So even though maybe more modern people might think of just box jumps, martial arts, our techniques also apply here as well. We want to execute the technique as quickly and powerfully as possible. Thinking about maximum speed and contraction is the way that it was taught to me. And then the last one, the author, he calls flexiometrics. So this word, again, is kind of his word, right? He's created it. And it's talking about what he would say intensive stretching, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The author is quite fond of yoga, and honestly, that is a pretty good discipline. I think when I was growing up in the dojo, yoga was kind of like a little hands-off. It was too new. It was too new for us to kind of incorporate. But now I think most everybody is recommending it, and I agree. It's a very good skill set to have. Now, with the flexiometrics, what I kind of learned it in martial arts, which is maybe a little bit different than the authors, is that I learned it as eccentric overload or joint overload. So basically, you're trying to do something to where the weight of whatever you're holding is a little bit more than your joint can handle, or eccentric. So when any kind of movement which is not concentric but eccentric is the overload. So that's where the most of the weight coming from. And then of course another good one is when you're holding a weight out like this. See the heavy weight here. You see how your joint it's not supposed to bend back, but this is an example of joint overload. And you can do it in stretching as well. You'll see it in gymnastics. They do the oversplit, right? So once you get your splits, you gotta do the oversplit, right? You go past the joint. Shaolin monks are famous for that as well. So that's kind of what I learned. What the author calls flexiometric, I learned it as eccentric overload or joint overload. But honestly, I bet you it's pretty much the same thing. Now the author does also include kind of some supplementary reading, just more information for you to look into. The first one is actually books by Professor Yuri Bogochansky. He's actually responsible for getting the Russian team many gold medals in the past. It was mostly because of his specific training drills that dealt with plyometrics, which is why his athletes did so well and they were dominating in the 1950s. Nowadays, the playing field is more even because I'm sure people bought his book and they, implemented the exercise, and now it's more even. But if you want to look more into plyometrics and what it is you're trying to achieve, strengthening the joints, tendons, ligaments, and remember, that's a long investment time. So the way that I like to think of it is that when you master something and you're like, what's the next step? Basically, you're just starting in plyometrics. That's how long it is, and you can do some amazing stuff, but again, you've got to stay in that long investment time. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the plyometric side, I would certainly recommend, and the author certainly recommends, to look into Yuri Verkhoshansky's books on plyometrics. I saw a couple, I don't know how many he wrote, but I can see that he's got a pretty good handle and grasp on what he was doing. Another thing is that Mark de Bramacher also mentions kind of the Yi Jin Jing form, which is a form of, I believe, dynamic self-resistance exercises. It's practiced by the Shaolin, but it's actually brought by an Indian Buddhist. What's his name? Indian Buddhist. His name was Bodhidharma. So he actually brought it over to the Shaolin monks. It's 12 tension dynamic self-resistance exercises. I looked it up online. It looks fine. It looks fine. I would say that it may look a little too simple, but then again, maybe that's maybe that's a secret. I don't know, but I'd certainly look into that. I haven't implemented it myself. I've been a little too busy with work and stuff like that, but hopefully I will get to it soon. And then what you also see in the Nutrition and Sleep Chapter 7, he talks about diet, nutrition, and sleep. So obviously sleep, get as much as you can, I would say. As far as diet, I understand that's a personal decision for everybody, and it should be. But I think the author has a pretty good idea about it being some kind of Mediterranean diet. So basically, instead of like beef, pork, and chicken, you want to lean more towards seafood. And the reason why is because seafood has a lot of omega-3s, and it's actually a greater value than a plant value omega-3. It's much better than that. And then of course you don't really see too many issues like with heart disease. Again, like you can have beef, pork, and chicken, but if you have too much, then I think that's when you're kind of looking at possible inflammation of the heart, things like that. But yeah, any kind of Mediterranean diet I think is probably a pretty good idea. I would say you're looking at, when you're ready for it, mostly vegetables, a lot of carbs, a little bit of meat. I would say a little bit of fruit, but that's just me. My body really doesn't like sugar, whether it's processed or natural. It still messes me up. But if you can handle it, that's fine. Keep it natural sugar though, not processed sugar. And then, what else is there? Oh, you don't have to do everything he says in the book, Times change and humans have different DNA. I've already rejected a few things in here actually that he recommends, based just kind of on me only, just my situation. I don't necessarily do. So an example is that he talks about eating 3 times a day, small meals, right? Or actually more than three meals a day, I believe. Yeah, so small meals throughout the day. I don't do that because I'm fasting. I dry fast, so for 19 hours. So I can't do that, that's just my situation. I don't do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with what he's saying, but it's like, that's just my situation, Then he talks about caffeine and tea being the better source of caffeine. Obviously, I can't have caffeine because it will just keep me awake forever, Again, the nutrition and sleep chapter, I think it's only 1 page. Yeah, it's 1 page. It's a nice chapter. It's only 1 page, but you don't have to do everything that he recommends. Again, there's one about, he's saying don't skip breakfast. Obviously, as a 19-hour fast, I don't eat again until 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So I eat from 12 to 5, and then I don't eat anything until the next day, So if you don't have anything like a baseline for nutrition and sleep, I think you can follow all this stuff, But as you continue your exercise journey, obviously things will appeal to you more than others, and you'll have to drop things, change things. So just treat it as a general guideline, a base template to help you get started as you custom create your own way, your own path. Also, just a quick note, he has a kind of recommendation for vitamins and minerals. I used to believe in that pretty strongly in my early exercise journey, but I actually dropped it. I dropped it, and that's my decision. And the reason why is because data's come out that when you take supplements, you don't absorb 100% of the supplements. I was so confused because I'd see them in the stores and I would see like, okay, what's the recommended amount for like, once a day for a man? And it's always like 5 times more. And I never understood why. And then I find out later, well, it's because the human body doesn't absorb all the vitamins and nutrients. Worst case scenario, you only take 10% of it. Best case scenario, you take 50% of it. So that's why the amounts were so high. I never noticed that. But just in my interpretation, and again, that's my experience too. I tried this stuff and I can't say for certain that it was helping or it was hurting. And so I just feel like, well, 10 to 50% is not good odds to me. So I'm just going to drop it, considering how expensive they are as well. Obviously, if you have deficiencies or things like that, you should still do that because, where else are you going to get it? But that's just up to you. You may have a different result with the vitamins and supplements, and that's great. But just to let you know, it's not a guarantee. And I think that science does still stand. The human body does not absorb 100% of vitamins and minerals. So synthetic. Obviously, if it's bioavailable, like in food and stuff, that's fine. But when you're talking about synthetic, like in a pill, yes, the body seems to be cautious and really doesn't absorb that much from it. Now going to the meat and potatoes of the book, which is the exercises themselves. The chapters are organized very well. So he actually kind of explains it to you very well. So let me see if I can see and you can see too. He talks about the plyometrics theory. He talks about the flexiometric, isometric theory. So he's explaining to you what it is, what I did in a crash course way. And then he has the exercises themselves, plyometric exercise, flexiometric exercise, isometric drills, the programs. We'll get into the programs later, but you'll see that he's organized it very well. He'll explain the theory of the exercise, what he is trying to teach you. Then he'll give you the exercises themselves, starting with the plyometrics on page 46. And what's great too is that he also has it set up to where the stuff you can do without any equipment. Then he's got stuff that you can do with a box, like the box jumps. Then he's got things you can do with hurdles, cones, medicine balls, elastic bands. You know what I'm saying? Like if you can buy this stuff and then you can still have exercises that you can do here as well. So very useful. There's the cone drills for you right here, right? So very neat stuff. He's got it organized very well. There's dumbbells, there's a bar, and these pictures are fantastic, by the way. I mean, these pictures are showing very well, drawn very well. They show you what you're supposed to do, the direction you're going. There's drills you can do on stairs if you're feeling super creative, right? So really good stuff. It's really neat. Medicine ball. I mean, it's really fantastic. He's also got kind of a section on partners. So your partner can help you too, to train you in certain ways, right? To help out with stuff. So that's pretty nice as well. And I think he'll kind of repeat the same thing, all this stuff, the equipment, onto the next thing, which of course is like isometrics, or flexiometric in this case. So stuff that you can do with all the equipment I mentioned being done for flexiometric, and then doing it again for isometric. So really good stuff. Again, these pictures are really good. They're drawn very well. The arrows are showing you where you feel the tension. It's really good stuff. I mean, the exercises themselves, I gotta say, is very, very good. Very, very good. I'd say like 9 out of 10. Really well done in the organization. So, if you're wondering, how many exercises are in here, or you don't have to think about it too, like what does it look like? I remember with speed training for martial arts, there was no pictures, so you couldn't really abstractly consider what you were doing, right? But you don't gotta do that right here. The pictures are right here. So you read the instruction, you make sure you understand in your mind, and then you got a picture as well to cooperate together. So very well done. I'm quite impressed. 2 quick notes. I also want to say that the book has a lot of quotes from various people. So A Goal is a Dream with a Deadline by Napoleon Hill. And then as you go through the exercises, you'll just kind of see random quotes in there as well. An oak is not felled at one blow, Spanish proverb. So that's kind of nice, I don't know about you guys or how the dojos are doing today, but philosophy training was just as important as punching and kicking when I was your age. So it's nice that, especially with the internet, you guys get this stuff for free. I had to pay for this stuff, okay? You can get this stuff for free. You can learn about, the person that said the quote. Just more things to add to your philosophical skill set, in your mind. And then also with the isometrics or flexometrics, you'll also come across the yoga poses, and they actually have the original name. So the chair pose is Utkatasana, right? We've got warrior pose 1, Virabhadrasana 1, So that's kind of nice too, because I would see things in here, some of the yoga exercises, and then I'd wonder like, oh, do they do it in reverse as well? Like the half moon pose, Virabhadrasana. I was wondering like, oh, could you do that opposite? And you can. You can, it's called reverse. And so that's kind of nice that you have the original Sanskrit, just out of respect, just out of cultural respect for the technique that you're learning. That's pretty nice. Chaturanga Dandasana, 4-limb staff pose. I just thought that was pretty cool, pretty neat. Next, we're going to talk about the programming chapter. So as I mentioned, this Isoplex theory bodybuilding program, maybe more like strength training program. This is a whole body program created by Mark de Bramacher. It's his exercise program, and he does have a programming chapter at the end, which goes, of course, from, easy, moderate, and difficult, things like that. And so the programs themselves, I find them to be appropriate for intermediate, up to intermediate. Just because, some of the things you'll see here for advanced seems a little advanced for me. As somebody who's been in the martial arts for 15, 20 years, there's not a lot I can't do, but there is quite a few here that I can't do, and I've added them to my exercise routine. So, I would pick things that this looks interesting, it's too easy, I threw it away. And then this seems pretty moderate, okay, I'll keep it until I master it. And then there's some where I can't do it at all, and it's like, oh geez, I gotta stay with this for years until I get it, But again, as somebody that should be an advanced athlete, again, don't just start this from nowhere, right? As an advanced athlete, I still think you're gonna have trouble with some of the things in the advanced level, So, again, that's just an excuse to just keep with it until you master it, and that's really how it should be approached. You should start with the beginner program, right? So he's got the beginner program, day 1. He has all the exercises, the reps, and the sets, and it's going to list to day 2, day 3. I think he has you train for all 6 days, and then you'll rest on the 7th day, like our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. You'll rest on the 7th day, and then you'll repeat the next week. And so the idea is that, first week you find out, I really suck. Hey, that's fine. Just stay with it. Week 2, because you're only going to get better. You can only rise. And then maybe by week 7 or 8, it becomes easy, right? And I do think it needs to become like pathetically easy. Not just to like, oh, I barely did it. That's not good enough. Stay with it until it's pathetically easy. When it's pathetically easy, then I think you can go to the second program, which is the trainee. And of course, same thing. You have exercises, reps, and sets on day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way to day 6. And like our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, you'll rest on day 7. And once again, same thing. You'll do that for the week. You'll reevaluate, was it too easy, too hard? If it's too hard, you'll stay with it for another week. And then, as the weeks go on, it should get easy, pathetically easy. Then of course you got the third program, intermediate. So that's kind of the path that you'll do on this training program, is that you have to keep with it until it's pitifully easy, and then you're ready to go to the next step. And another thing too is that I was worried that the exercises here were kind of hard to find because the names are pretty generic, and if I saw something in here, I'd be like, oh, where was it? I have to look through the whole thing if I could remember if it was branched in isometric, plyometric, or flexiometric. But here, you'll see with the exercise, at least in the programmings, so unless your exercise appears in the programming, then you'll find it, but if not, you'll have to search for it. Let's look at the high boat pose, right? So that one is 10.1.13. You can actually go back to 10.1.13, and there it is, high boat pose. So that's kind of nice that if you're looking for an exercise that happens to be in the programming chapter, you can find it. But if it's not, then you can't find it. You'll have to go through the whole 3 sections to find out what it was you recall seeing. Now, a couple of final thoughts. First of all, I love this book for providing kind of upper body plyometrics. In my martial arts journey and training, it was very hard to find upper body plyometrics, or at least like new ones or new ideas. Obviously for our training it was like box jumps, oh, of course, and lots of kicks, oh, of course, and lots of punches, but there was never an idea of like an actual exercise for the punches, you know what I mean? I think at most we did was probably a clapping push-up, and that was it. That was it. We never saw anything. There are suggestions here that you can make the clapping push-up more difficult if you put your feet on boxes, and the higher it is, the harder it will be to do. Never thought of that. He also has the clapping depth push-up, which is where you're kind of like, there's 2 raised surfaces, your hands go here, you'll kind of push up and hop in the middle and back on top. Never saw that before. He also has kind of the hopping handstand push-up, which again, I never thought to do that, which you're in a handstand, right? And then you'll kind of pop or hop out and then hop back in. Very difficult. I remember trying that at first, couldn't do nothing. And now in a couple of weeks, I'm able to move my hands around. I don't think I'm doing it right still, but I mean, I'm getting somewhere, So I do appreciate that there's a much more kind of open mind, creativity in regards to the upper body plyometrics. I do want to recommend one, which is, again, only for advanced athletes. It's the falling catch. This is where you literally, from standing, just fall straight down and catch yourself at the last second. You can see something like this in Batman Begins movie, except that Christian Bale didn't really do it, but you get the idea. If you want to see somebody actually do it, I would say BTS used to do it in their Dionysus choreo, but they didn't because Jungkook got hurt. But yeah, basically you just fall straight down and catch yourself before you smack your face in the ground. I remember training that, and it was, I wouldn't say it was difficult, but you can feel a lot of pressure in the wrist and joints. So obviously don't do this without, severe strength and power in your joints, tendons, and ligaments in the hands. But now I do it, it's almost kind of like a joke. Of course, right? It's too easy, it's like a joke. So yes, I appreciate the author kind of re-inspiring, sparking interest in me about, being able to do upper body plyometrics, because the lower body ones are pretty easy to come up with, but the upper body ones are very difficult. Now, the numbering system that's used in the book I talked about with the high boat pose, you can find any exercise in here that's in the programming chapters, but as I mentioned, if you're looking for one that's not in here, but you saw it and you just remembered and you wanted to find it, you're not going to find it unless you know which of the big 3 it's in. Either isometric, plyometric, or flexiometric. So I think that's probably the only con, is that you can't really find every exercise, only if it just happens to be in the programming chapter. And as far as I can tell, I don't think Mr. Debremacher put every exercise in the programming chapter. I mean, he's got at least 5 or 6 programming chapters by difficulty from easy to hard, but still, I don't think he'd be able to fit all of them in there. I just think that's a little too unlikely, personally. Let me see how many he's got. Come on. So the programming chapters, he's only got 5 of them. So beginner, trainee, intermediate, advanced, and partner. I don't know if he put every exercise in there. I'm gonna guess probably not. So you won't be able to find one that's not in the programming chapters and you just recall. Another thing too is that he actually has 2 exercises named the exact same thing. I believe they were lying one-legged stretch. Yeah, lying one-legged stretch. He calls 2 different exercises the exact same title. So I was confused at first because I wrote his stuff down and I trained it and I saw the exercise and I saw it again and I was like, what? It's actually 2 different ones. So it's the lying one-legged stretch, except there's a way where you do it when the leg's over you and you pull over, and then there's one where the leg is at the side of you and you pull it out that way. And it's like, oh, I looked at it, they're literally used the exact same name. And so I think for that one, it's kind of like, well, all you can really do, I think, in like an update to this book is call either, you could call it, you know, the lying one-legged stretch and then lying one-legged stretch to the side. That way the person knows it goes out to the side rather than over them. But I think that's the only one where I saw like the exercise had the exact same name and I was like, oh no, what am I gonna do? What could I do? You know, it's called the same thing. But I'd like to see an update with that, with parentheses on the lying one-legged stretch over, lying one-legged stretch to the side. That way the person kind of knows which direction the leg goes. And then for an updated version too, I'd like to see kind of the author, because this is written in 2017, kind of his new knowledge gained from, you know, 7 years ago. You know, has anything changed? Has some exercises he thought would do really well or not that well, or ones that he didn't take seriously are actually pretty good? I think it'd be pretty good to kind of have like a retrospective from the author, you know, in terms of like, you know, because exercises are always changing, you know, new ways to practice and train are always changing. Some things are better, make some things obsolete, some things are new. I think it'd be really interesting to have the author's approach on that subject. So, in conclusion of this book, what do I think? Well, I think it's fantastic. You know, easily 8.5 to 9, 8.5 out of 10 and up. You know, could easily be more than 8.5. It's really good. Written in 2017, the information done is just meticulous, well thought out, well organized. You know, he explains everything, why you're doing this action, this training. Really just really just incredibly fantastic. Again, the pictures and illustrations are phenomenal. They help you understand. So when you read the instruction, because he does give you the paragraph to explain the exercise, which, you know, will create the abstract seed, but then you actually see the picture, and that just helps back it up, you know, kind of bolster it even more. I have to say this book definitely helped me with getting back to my training. As I mentioned, I stopped training because I was bored. I was doing the same thing. I didn't want to train anymore. I needed something new. And so it was very easy for me and appropriate for me as well that I could go through this book and just pick out stuff that, you know, can I do this? Is it too easy? Then throw it away. Is it moderate? I'll keep it until I master it. Is it difficult? Then I'll keep it until I actually can do it. You know, again, don't do that unless you've been training for like 20 years. But, you know, I can do that because I put in the work, okay? I can do that. You know, it was easy to just pick out the stuff that I wanted. Of course, I'm seeing exercises I've never seen before, never thought of before. And I've changed my whole program. I have a dedicated day for isometric, plyometric, and flexiometric. I have 4 rest days. I know that's a bit heavy, but I'm also 35 years old. I'm not a young guy anymore, so honestly, I feel like that's appropriate. Full-time job, YouTube, you know, stuff like that. So as long as I have a dedicated day for the big 3, the Holy Trinity, honestly, I think that's doing just fine for me. So once again, I love this book, 8.5 and up out of 10. Please consider checking it out, renting it, reading it. I'd still own it. You know, I talked about you could just rent speed training and transcribe it. You might as well just own this, you know. You might as well own this because it's just such a great reference guide to have, to hold on to. And again, you know, as the time goes on, my training can change. You know, it can change. Maybe I have something new, or I can change something. You know, that's exactly what I did for both of these books. The Isoplex and the Plyoflex, you know, I just kind of like went through, what can I do, what can I add? And obviously as I start to master skills, then I can change stuff around, you know. So once again, highly recommended. Please look into it if you have time, or if you're ever any out of ideas for exercise. I hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions or comments, you can always leave it down in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time, okay? Bye now.
You learned martial arts! Martial arts, good!